His name is Eugene Lambe, and he is known throughout the world for his skills in handcrafting Uilleann pipes and concert wood flutes. He is also a man with a natural-born flair for storytelling, which he accomplishes by traveling and performing age-old Irish music on the instruments and in the Celtic language in which the songs were created. It's a tradition to which Eugene is dedicated and has helped to restore within his Irish homeland.
My name is Eugene Lambe.
No middle name.
Michael, after my grandfather.
And is Eugene after anyone?
The Pope.
No.
Yes. One of my great regrets. When I was born, my mother was accosted by two nuns and she hadn't got a name for me, and the nun said, call him after the Pope. Eugenio Picelli, that was the Pope's.
But you were Irish.
I was Irish, yeah. I thought about changing it quite a few times because I'm an atheist. It doesn't suit me now, but so I'm stuck with it. I'll leave it.
You're a Reformed Irish Catholic.
I'm a recovering Irish Catholic.
Okay, we might delve into that at some point, but right now we're going to keep moving.
I was only 8-year-old I was playing music.
How did you learn?
There was a teacher in my young school when I was that age that used to play every Friday on a tin whistle. He used to write out some notes for us and show us some little tunes. I still remember the first tune I ever learned was this one. You know this one. First one we ever learned.
And did you mind that it was an American song?
Didn't care, it was just music. We just wanted to get something out of there.
Was your family musical?
My mother used to play fiddle then, but she, like most mothers at the time, once children came along, they gave up everything. They weren't allowed to work anyway.
I interviewed a man yesterday who told me that. It was Irish law, up until the 70s.
Yeah. They also gave up other hobbies and pursuits as well, so she gave up the fiddle. But I was conscious of the fact there was a fiddle in the house, and my uncle lived with us and he played a fiddle. And my grandfather played concertina. He was lost in the Bay of Biscay. He was on a ship going to South America and went down, and he left his concertina behind. So there was a musical sort of a connection in the house. So when I went to school and the schoolmaster had a whistle, I was very keen to play it.
And so you said when you now go to Galway to lecture at the university, music becomes a little more important in your life?
Yeah, there was a lot of music around Galway in those times when I came back. And also Clare, I had connections with Clare as well, because as a student I went down to Dublin in the early days, in the 60s, and I met all the old people around there. And when I went down to Clare, it was almost like the language was still alive. If it was a language, it was still being spoken, and the music was still being played.
When you say the music, tell me what that means to you.
But it's more than just the tunes. It was the way of life and the talking about musicians and the passing down of the... For instance, it would have an awful lot of contact with place. There's a little tune called, this is a little tune here, it's called The Piper's Chair. A man that taught it to me took me up into a field and showed me a stone in the field, which is shaped just like a chair. And he said, long time ago, there was a piper who used to sit in that chair and play for people dancing around. And that's where the tune came from. And ever since it was called the Piper's Chair. So when you'd hear a story associated with tune and it's associated with a place, there's a depth in it that you don't get from the music book, which would have notes and you could play perfectly. You have all the ornamentation, but doesn't have the connections. Every time you play it, you have that picture in your head.
Yeah, what a magical experience.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing, and that's what I found when I went down to Dublin and places, and I just got more involved in that and less interested in policy committee meetings and in the college.
But the reality of life is probably that music isn't going to pay you like college.
Well, I took a big risk really when I left. I had been making the instruments, these pipes and things, at the time as a hobby. I always did it as a hobby, making things, but I suddenly got this idea that I'd really like to do it full time. But it was scary because, well, music wasn't as popular as it is now. There weren't so many people playing. But I knew that instruments were scarce. People who played flutes, for example, the wooden flutes that we play now, were playing bad instruments, and they weren't nobody was making them. They were just playing instruments from the last century, really. And I sort of had this idea that if you started making them, there might be a business in it. Then I bought a small little schoolhouse down in County Clare, in a place called Finol. and set up a business there.
How close was that to Doolin?
About 7 miles.
Because Doolin is the seat
Doolin was the
of
Mecca, yeah.
of Irish music.
That's why I picked that place down there. But the downside of it was I was right in the middle of the tourist area, and so it was very hard to get work done. I was so popular at making stuff that time that all day long would be spent trying to keep people away so I could get some work done. So it was a sort of a double-edged sword. I was in a good place to do business, but I was also in a good place to be bothered by people all the time coming to the workshop.
Were you selling to tourists?
Sometimes the tourists would buy stuff, you know. They'd go to the pub and they'd hear musicians playing and they'd suddenly get excited and want to buy something. So I would get business from them. But a lot of the time you would just be part of their itinerary, really.
So what did you start making first?
I started making pipes.
Is that black one a pipe?
That's a set of Uilleann pipes, yeah. Will I play it?
Would you? That would be awesome. Thank you. Now, did you make those pipes?
I did, yeah.
The brass and everything?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a bellows for a fireplace.
Yeah. That's made from Irish wood called Ellen. There's a lot of different materials in a set of pipes. Leather and Ellen and African blackwood and Spanish cane for reeds, brass work.
Is the black body of that pipe wood or metal?
Wood, yeah, yeah.
Are they always wood?
Well, usually, yeah.
Because
it has to be very dense wood.
Because of sound? You need the
Yeah,
sound?
because you'd have a very sort of a woolly bore. It would catch the sound, it wouldn't make it clear.
Okay.
You need a good hard timber.
You'd never made these before, and the things you're strapping on between the bellows and the pipes and the bag, there's an incredible amount of technical knowledge to create that. How in the world did you ever learn that?
Well, when I was playing music myself, I used to go to a man in Dublin called Matt Kiernan. He was a retired policeman. And I suppose he changed my life in that up till then I thought that you had to go to shops or factories to buy things. And when I went to Matt's house, I realised that he was making these instruments in his back kitchen. He had a small little lathe. There's lots of lathes in here. There's one there, and one inside. He had a small little lathe that was powered with his foot, like a saw machine. And he made these things on it. And suddenly, that was a little bit of an epiphany for me to realise that
You could do it.
do this at home, you know. And so that influenced me. He'd had just a piece of timber and he'd turn it and bore it. And I used to visit him. I never actually took courses from him, but I'd visit him and have a cup of tea and maybe a cheese sandwich. And he'd show me what he was making for the day. And I'd go back with my head full of ideas. And I'd go back to the college where I was doing my degree. And there was a little workshop in the college. And I started making a bit of the pipes for myself.
So when you were a kid?
Well, I was
Teenager?
18, 19. Then I go back to him with the piece and I'd get him to criticise it or critique it. And he'd say, yeah, that's good. Or he'd try and say, it's working good.
Did you know how to play them at the time?
Yeah.
So once you got it together, you could figure out whether it was a good one or not.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of trial and error and making mistakes.
Before we started this interview, you said to me, there's nothing that teaches you as well as doing.
Yeah.
No amount of book learning or anything like that.
There's a great Sufi story about that, about a Sufi apprentice who wanted to make a piece of pottery. And he put everything he had into this piece of clay. And when he had it out of the kiln, it wasn't so successful. And he went to his master. He said, I'm really disappointed. I really tried my best to make this pot. Why did it fail? And the master said, there was too much of you in it and not enough pot. And he said, how can I get me out of it? He said, you have to make 1,000 first. At the end of the 1,000, there'll be very little of you in it, and it'll be all pot.
What a great
and it's
story.
a bit like that with making things. You can do it in your head, but you have to actually do it, and reality will teach you.